Well, hello there, gang. Welcome to the 30. Thank you for being here on this. Well, I guess it's a new week, right? Coming on to the end of the week if you're watching us live. This is a 30 where we provide relevant information to you, our viewers, and our listeners. The goal is to help you to enhance your personal, professional, and spiritual lives. I am your host, Patrick. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, always a pleasure to speak with you. And if you would like to join us, make sure that you hit in the chat. Make sure that if you have a question or comment, put that in the chat. Love to hear from you, speak with you, and see what's on your mind. Do me a huge favor. Another one, like and share this broadcast. Make sure someone else is getting the information. Make sure they're receiving the same information that you are getting. If you're watching from YouTube, subscribe to our channel at the Jackman Group LLC. Well, today we'll continue our conversation on how organizations can identify and develop future leaders, obviously through training, right? So we're looking at it from a training perspective. A couple of months ago, we looked at it from a coaching perspective. We're focusing primarily on training. How can organizations and leaders, how can they identify and develop future leaders through training? If you're with us on last week, if you were live or if you saw it in replay, I made the point that if organizations, if they're serious about long-term success, it's not only for their current leaders to train and develop, but it's also important that you train and develop future leaders. Actually, it's extremely important that you begin the process of identifying one and training and developing future leaders within your organization. We spoke about the impact. We know the impact to any organization, to its leaders and employees. We know that if there's a lack of identification or development of future leaders, what that can look like. We talked about not being reactive, but as opposed to being proactive. Proactive in terms of you having a process that's in place. And not only is there a process, but you're actually executing and implementing what you have put on paper so that you're not having to scramble. It's not fun to have to scramble when key leaders leave, and which impacts productivity and morale among the employees. So, as opposed to doing that, you feel comfortable that you have a pipeline, or what we call a bench of prospective or future leaders ready to go. So, identifying and developing future leaders within your organization, as we establish, is crucial, crucial for the long term success. And we established that effective leadership and development and also setting up training programs can help organizations in one, nurture talent, two, build a strong pipeline or bench, and three, ensure a smooth transition of leadership as your current leaders may retire or move on, or they may be permanently separated from payroll. So you want to make sure that you have things already in place, that you have a some leadership, whatever it is, from a program, training, if it's mentorship, if it's coaching. But we're speaking specifically about training your leaders, developing your future leaders, identifying who they are, and getting them up to speed so that you can have a smooth transition whenever that comes for your current leaders to move on. So, also on last week's show, as a review, I give you 3 steps. Well, nope, I give you 5 steps. 5 steps organizations can take to identify and develop future leaders through training. I talked about number 1, identifying your leadership competency. Make sure that you have that identified and in place. And we talked about what are some of the competencies. It could be strategic thinking, communication, decision making, emotional intelligence. We also talked about number 2, having a leadership program, training program in place, or having it on the table, but you're looking to make sure that you have one in place, right? If you don't currently have one, but you're sourcing to make sure that you have one ready to go. And we talked about these programs can be either conducted in-house or outsourced to leadership training companies like ours, the Jackman Group LLC, because that's what we do. And third, we talked about encouraging your leaders, current and future leaders, to attend workshops and seminars, exposing them to new ideas and strategies and network opportunities. Then number 4, we talked about the importance of succession planning. We talked about that succession planning is not a one-time thing. It's a continuous and it's ongoing progress where you need to set things up and set it in place so that when things happen, again, you are not at a loss. So it's very important that you start to formalize, if you do not have, you start to formalize a succession planning process that starts to identify future leaders within the organization. And we talked about what that looks like. We talked about making sure that they are developed, right? And then the last one that we talked about was having a continuous learning and development culture. And I'll talk more about that as we go into the second part for today, which is part 2. And I'll give you another 5 steps. But we talked about making sure that the importance is placed on continuous learning and development, not just for leaders, but for all employees. And you're encouraging those that have the goals of becoming a leader, whether it's upper in terms of your C-suites, or if it's some of your managers or supervisors, but really finding out where your employees are, having a conversation with them. What are their short-term and long-term goals? And encouraging them to, if that's where they want to go in terms of some form of management position, supervisory position, or senior leadership position, but emphasizing the importance of continuous learning and development. So that was what we talked about last week. Today, I'm going to give you another 5 steps organizations and its leaders can take to identify and develop future leaders through training and development. Again, I'd like to hear from you. If you drop us a line, hello to, let me give a shout out to Alfreda. Thank you for being here. And also good evening to Sabrina. Tika Talks. Hello, Sabrina. Thank you so much for being here. So if you would like to drop us a line, just say hi. If you want to have us answer some questions. Another person here. Wow. Shout out to Erica. Hello, Erica, down here in South Carolina. I hope all is well. I'll see you on tomorrow. So let's talk about another 5 steps. 5 steps organizations and leaders can take to identify and develop future leaders through training and development. So previously I talked about having a culture, right? A culture. And culture is important. So we want to cultivate a leadership culture. And not just cultivate it, but first you have to create it if you don't have it. So create a culture that values leadership development, that understand that leadership training and development is important to the organization. And culture starts from the top. And some organizations, I've seen it where the leader says, okay, we're going to develop a culture, but the leader or leaders never really lived the culture. So they talk a good talk about developing a culture, but never really model or live the culture. Well, if you're going to value or create a culture that values leadership development training, that means that you as the leader, whether you are the CEO, the president, the COO, wherever you sit, as far as the leadership is, as far from a leadership perspective, is that you have to, as you create it, it's imperative that you model it, right? That you execute, that you show it, that it's important to the organization. Because if you don't do it, guess what? Your employees are not going to do it. So it has to start from the top and carry down through. So creating a culture that values leadership development, leadership training, and you identify it as a core aspect in your mission or guiding principles. So as you go into organizations, and I am in organizations all over the country, when I see as part of their mission or guiding principles that development, especially leadership development, is part of that principle or culture or mission, I get excited because I know that this person or this leader or this organization gets it. It is part of their fabric and making sure that not only employees are developed through training and coaching, but also the leaders, because we see it so many times where employee development is emphasized and stressed, but leadership development is not. So you develop your employees, but you're not developing your leaders. So who is going to train the leaders? Who trained the leaders, right? The leaders need to be developing, trained just as much as your employees need to be developed and trained. So that's number one. Build, create, and cultivate a culture of leadership training and development. So, how are we going to do that? This brings me to number two. Step number two, just as important as developing a culture of training and development, is now you have to allocate resources to that line item, to that culture point, right? To that area. It doesn't come free. It doesn't just show up and says, we're going to put this as part of our mission. We're going to put this as part of our guiding principles. And then by somehow osmosis, it just happens. No, it has to be intentional, and resources must be allocated to that project, to that mission, to that guiding principle, to that initiative. So a leadership training and development budget has to be established. Investing in the future leadership team is an investment in the organization's long-term success. I'll say that again because this is critical. Investing in the future leadership team of an organization is an investment in an organization's long-term success. As I told you, we are in, as a company, the Jackman Group. One of our specialties is leadership development, training, and coaching. So we do a lot with whether small or large organizations. We do a lot with leaders. We do a lot with teams. And what I've seen, some companies understand the importance of investing in leadership development and training. They get it. They understand it. They know that it's going to take an investment in order to move the culture forward, in order to move the initiative forward. They get it. But I've also seen on the other side where clients or prospective clients call us in and says, hey, we would like to develop our leaders. And can you do it for this amount? And really, deep down, I'm thinking, no, this can't be for real. Because development of your leadership team, current and future, as a leader, if you're in charge of that budget, if you're in charge of development, whether it's an HR perspective or it's coming through HR or it's coming from the president and CEO, there's no way that you should cheapen this. There's no way that you should say in terms of, well, can you give us on the cheap? No, it can't be done. That tells me that you are not invested in your organization's long-term success. An investment, if you're serious about long-term success, an investment in the organization and your leaders and your teams and your employees, it has to be a serious an investment, and it has to be intentional, and it has to be very strategic in how it's done. So that's what we do. We come in side by side with the stakeholder and we say, okay, here, what is your desired outcome? What's taking place now? What are some of the gaps? So we come in and we show you how we can partner with you. We've demonstrated to you how we've done it with others, and we demonstrated to you how we can do it with your team. One of the things that I talk to leaders about that bring us in, whether from the HR department, I talk to them about the change is not going to happen overnight. It's a process. It's a process. And learning, when it comes to training and learning, it's not an overnight thing. It's a process that we take. Anytime you change, think about if you're a golfer, if you play sports, anytime you change something that you were doing, what happens? You don't become truly successful at it the first time out. right? You have to work on it. So that means it's not an overnight change. It's a process that will take place. What I've also seen as far as a leadership development budget and resources is that organizations want to look at it from a one-time event. Well, can you come in and train our leaders and our teams one time? Doesn't happen, folks. If you're looking for serious change, if you're looking to develop your future leaders through training, if you're looking for an investment which will help your organization for long-term success, it has to be a commitment from you, the leaders, and from you, the organization. And it's a long-term process. It's not a one-time initial training. So the budget has to reflect not only the initial training, but it also has to reflect an investment for follow-up and reinforcement. Now, that can be done in a number of ways. It can be done where you hire firms like us to come in and do the assessment, the strategic planning, talk about not just the training, but actually conduct the training and conduct the follow-up and reinforcement going forward. So that's one way. The second way is that you can bring firms like us in to supplement what your team is doing. So work side by side with your training team. So if you have a training team, we will work side by side with your training team and supplementing what they have with what we have. So we work in conjunction with your existing training team. That's the second way. The third way, right, in terms of as you look to invest in your future leaders, is through what we call a train-to-trainer certification. And that's where we come in. You have an existing training team, a group of trainers, and we come in and we do a certification for your trainers, meaning that we train them as to how to train with our product or system, right? So we train them how to deliver the content that we will license to you. So not only are we training them, but we're also making sure that they are following up based on the license agreement that we sign. So we're licensing the content and we're doing a trainer certification, and we're checking in to ensure that it's delivered in the right way that it was designed to. So that's where we are with the second way to or step organizations and teams can take to identify and develop future leaders through training. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 is to conduct or provide regular feedback to potential leaders, right? And you measure their success or measure their progress. So regular feedback and review. So when we talk about feedback, this feedback should be constructive feedback. No, I said constructive feedback. I didn't say constructive criticism, because there's no such thing, right? It drives me crazy. When I hear folks talk about constructive criticism. How can criticism be constructive? Doesn't make sense. So we talk about constructive feedback, where you are measuring, right? Where you're measuring where each person is. You're giving feedback, you're tracking their progress, and you're making sure that the feedback is tied to the leadership competencies that you've identified earlier, that we talked about as the first step. So this brings up another point. If you're going to conduct regular feedback to your potential leaders, I would think that your leaders or managers and supervisors should know how to give and receive feedback. They should know or have a feedback model, or a feedback process in place. Are they trained to do that, or are you leaving it by chance? So you can't leave learning to chance. You can't leave training to chance, right? You have to get in there and do it. Do they or don't they? Do they know how to give good quality feedback? Is there a process in place? Have they been trained on it? How to give and receive feedback? If the answer is no, we don't have a process in place, or no, that they don't know how to give quality feedback, then we need to do something about that. We need to help you help your leaders to understand that constructive feedback is a skill. It's something that has to be learned. It's not something that you get up in the morning and says, okay, I'm going to give some constructive feedback. No, it's a process, right, that you go by. And it's a skill that has to be learned. So that's another thing that we can do for you as leaders and organizations. So let me get to, so I give you the first one was cultivate a leadership culture, a culture of learning and development, where value is placed. Make sure that you allocate adequate resources and a budget for leadership development and training. The third one is making sure that you provide a regular feedback for potential leaders and track their progress. But more importantly, ensuring that your leaders and managers and supervisors understand how to give constructive feedback, making sure that there's a model in place and that the feedback process is in place and they understand how to do that. Number 4, and depending on where you are, this may differ depending on the type of organization. But one of the 5 things that we talk about, the 5 steps, is to, whenever possible, promote from within the organization to fill your leadership roles. Now, obviously, if you don't have the leaders, if your current leaders or future leaders don't have the competencies and don't have the skill, right? You have to go outside to fill the leadership role. But if you have your leaders, if you develop a bench of future leaders, then you can promote from within. What does this do? This now helps and reinforce the idea within the organization that there are clear opportunities for career advancement. It is also a selling point from an HR department. Whenever you look to fill a position, now you can put that on the table and says, hey, here we have a clear path of career advancement. We develop our leaders. We develop future leaders. We develop our teams, and we have a clear path. We have a career pathing system, a process that's in place. And this will help you to promote from within. But again, if your current leaders or future leaders don't have the competencies and skills, then ultimately you have to go outside. But you want to build your bench from inside, because the inside, those candidates know the culture, understand the system, understand if there are products and services involved, understands the products and services. So that's an advantage. Plus, you've already invested in them. So if they're qualified and they're prepared to take the next step, then go for it. It also helps with morale within the organization. So I said 5, but looks like we are run out of time. We may have a part 3, but I wanted to give you 4. If I were to focus on number 5, it would be this, which is critical. Number 5, which is very important to any organization, however small or large. We're talking about 5 steps, 5 steps any organization can take to identify and develop future leaders through training. The last one is ensure that your leadership development programs are inclusive and accessible to all employees, regardless of their background. Right? So you want to make sure that any training and development, any programs that you have within the organization, that they're inclusive and accessible to everyone, because you don't know where your future leaders are going to come from. Your future leader may have just started a month ago. So you want to make sure that whatever leadership development programs that you have, again, are inclusive and accessible, regardless of background. So what we're doing here is that we're building and creating a diverse leadership bench. And that's important for any organization, however small or large, profit or non-for-profit. So I hope these five that we talked about was helpful for you, because identifying and developing future leaders through training, as we talked last week, this is an ongoing process. And it requires commitment. It requires the leaders are intentional, and it also requires resources. So it's very important to adapt your strategies, whatever strategies that you are formulating or creating, that these strategies and the goals of the organization are built to foster a culture of continuous improvement and leadership development and training. So I hope it was helpful. I look forward to hearing from you. Let's see what, go back and hit on a couple before we end. Couple of comments here. Elevate Haiti, shout out. Great point. Let's see what Sabrina said. Investing in future leadership team is an investment in an organizational mission and bottom line for sure. Absolutely. Sabrina continued to say leadership is in an area of great change at the moment. Point on, spot on, right? So we can't do the things we used to do because things have changed. So as a mindset, we also have to change. So leaders, you definitely need to change and understand where we are and where we're going. And then lastly, let's see. Alfreda says, in my humble opinion, I'm a lifetime learner in most aspects. So great. So thank you so very much. Again, we will see you next week. We'll continue to look at this topic. And we have a great announcement that's coming next week. So you don't want to miss it. I'm excited about it. Next week's show, we'll focus on the announcement as we look at leadership from our perspective, what we are going to do to help you and future leaders at the Jackman Group. So we have a great announcement, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to show you, and we're going to reveal what it is. So stay tuned as we move down to helping you, giving you the tools necessary to equip you to be great leaders, to be exceptional leaders, to take you from good to great to exceptional, to help your organization grow, to help your organization exceed expectations, and to be greater than where they are, to be tremendously successful. So that's our goal, to help you as much as we can, to take you from where you are to where you desire to be. So that's it for now. I want to thank you again. If you would like us to, if you'd like to email us, our email address is info@jackmangroupllc.com. That again is info@jackmangroupllc.com. If you would like to chat with us, our phone number is 585-861-6828. That is 585-861-6828. So until next week, folks, may God continue to bless you and your family. We look forward to chatting with you and seeing you on next week and future episodes. And if you want to partner with us, we would love the opportunity to work with you and your teams, whether through training or coaching or helping your teams to be more effective. Drop us a line, contact us, and we would love to work with you. So blessings to you until next week. Thank you again for this opportunity.